This story begins under the golden skies of the Kalahari Desert, where a small airplane glided through the wind, cutting across the endless, desolate beauty of Africa. For the 5 people on board, this journey was meant to be the most unforgettable adventure of their lives. Below them stretched vast golden plains, waves of sand dunes, and scattered thorny bushes, a landscape so breathtaking it could steal your breath away. But little did they know, these calm skies were about to change their fate forever. In the very heart of the Kalahari, a place where survival itself is a miracle, one of the plane's engines suddenly malfunctioned. The pilot made a split-second decision to attempt an emergency landing. Welcome viewers, the winning mind, where today's story takes us to the famous Kalahari Desert of southern Africa, a vast land covering nearly 900,000 square kilometers, making it the 6th largest desert in the world, though not as dry as the Sahara. The Kalahari's terrain is harsh and unforgiving. Over 300 species of wild animals roam here, including lions, leopards, African wild dogs, and the mighty elephants. Its wildlife and desert safaris attract tourists from across the globe, and the desert is so vast that it stretches across 3 countries: South Africa, Namibia, and Botswana. In Botswana's capital, Gaborone, a company executive named Carlo Plaiss had arranged a private flight to show his friends the beauty of the Kalahari. Joining him were his close friend Mike, Mike's wife Nicoline, and their pilot, Costa. Marconos. Their aircraft was a twin-engine Cessna 414, small but powerful, a plane known for its reliability on adventure flights. Everyone was in high spirits, smiles, laughter, and cameras recording every moment. The sky above was clear and calm, but that peace was about to shatter. About an hour into the flight, Nicoline looked out the window and saw oil leaking from one of the wings. At first, she didn't understand what she was seeing, but then she quickly alerted her husband. The pilot checked and immediately shut down the affected engine. He assured everyone not to panic. After all, the plane had 2 engines, and it could still fly safely on one. But the scorching air of the Kalahari and the thin atmosphere at high altitude were taking their toll. To stay airborne, the plane now needed both engines. Gradually, the aircraft began to lose altitude. The pilot tried to contact the control tower, but the radio had gone silent. There was only one option left to bring the plane down, wherever possible. Below them lay nothing but rocks, bushes, and soft sand. No clear place to land. The pilot instructed everyone to fasten their seatbelts and brace for impact. Moments later, the plane slammed into the desert floor and vanished into a massive cloud of dust. When they regained consciousness, they were surrounded by smoke and the smell of burning fuel. Nicoline's hand was badly burned, and Mike's wife was struggling to breathe. Working together, they managed to pull each other out of the wreckage. But just as they got to safety, the plane's fuel tank ignited, and with a thunderous explosion, the entire aircraft burst into flames. The truth was now undeniable. In the vast emptiness of the Kalahari Desert, no one on Earth knew where they were. No water, no food, only endless sand, thorny bushes, and lifeless trees in every direction. 2 of the passengers were seriously injured. They needed medical help immediately. Any delay could mean death. Still, everyone clung to the hope that a rescue team would somehow find them. But that was the real problem. Without knowing their exact location, no help could ever reach them. And even if a search was launched, it would take days to reach this remote stretch of land. As the sun began to set, Carlo and the others gathered pieces of wood from the burning wreckage and built a bonfire. Their only defense against the wild animals of the night. All through the dark hours, strange sounds echoed around them, the distant roar of a lion, and the rustle of unseen creatures moving through the bushes. Only the flames stood between them and the predators. When morning came, there was still no sign of a rescue team. Time was slipping away, and all 5 survivors were growing weaker. Their lips were cracked, their throats so dry that speaking was almost impossible that dawn. They began licking the dew off the leaves of nearby trees, but only a few drops reached their tongues. Before the blazing sun turned the rest to vapor. Around noon, they suddenly heard the faint sound of an airplane engine above. Their faces lit up with hope. They rushed out from the wreckage waving their clothes, sending up plumes of smoke. But it was all in vain. The plane above couldn't see them. The golden skies of the Kalahari had swallowed their last hope. They now understood the grim truth. If thirst or hunger didn't kill them, some wild beast eventually would. Finally, Carlo Plaiss and the pilot, Costa Marconos, made a decision. Sitting and waiting meant certain death. They had to move, to search for help. It was a dangerous choice, but it was the only one left. They left the injured behind, and started walking into the desert in search of water, or any sign of civilization. Back at the crash site, those who remained were growing weaker with every passing hour. The scorching sun was draining the last of their strength. Meanwhile, Carlo and Costa kept walking all day across sand and bushes, sometimes passing the carcasses of dead animals, their stench hanging in the air. There was no sign of water anywhere. That night, a light drizzle began to fall, but it was so little that the drops evaporated before they could even touch the ground. 2 days had passed since the crash. Carlo and Costa were beginning to lose hope, yet they refused to stop. They feared they might be walking in the wrong direction, but turning back was no longer an option. At the wreck site, Things were even worse. Mike's condition had deteriorated. His wounds and thirst kept pushing him in and out of consciousness. In desperation, Nicolene decided to search for help herself. She had barely walked a few steps when she noticed a small puddle of rainwater, collected beneath a tree, barely enough to fill a glass. They took turns drinking from it, and those few precious drops felt like the last spark of life keeping them alive. The third and fourth days had turned into an endless struggle between life and death. Everyone's faces were pale and lifeless, their bodies covered in wounds, trembling from weakness and exhaustion. Some of the injured had developed maggots in their wounds, while far away, Carlo and Costa were still somehow alive, untouched by wild animals in the merciless vastness of the Kalahari. That alone was nothing short of a miracle. The sand, the heat, the hunger, the thirst, every moment tested their limits. By the end of the fifth day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, something appeared in the distance, a small hut rising out of the shimmering haze. At first, they thought it was another illusion, a cruel mirage, like the many false hopes that had already broken them before. But this time, fate was truly kind. The hut was real, and inside lived a young girl, barely able to stand. Carlo and Costa stumbled to the door and knocked. When the girl opened it, she saw two men covered in dirt and sweat, but with a faint spark of life still glowing in their eyes. Without hesitation, she gave them water, and that first sip felt like breathing life again. She quickly used her radio to contact the nearest station, and within moments, their message reached the control tower. Meanwhile, rescue teams had already been searching across different parts of the Kalahari, but they had been looking in the wrong direction. Now, with the correct coordinates finally in hand, a helicopter was immediately dispatched to their location. By the morning of the fourth day after the crash, as the survivors near the wreckage were counting what they believed to be their final breaths, the distant roar of helicopter blades suddenly filled the sky. Hope surged through their veins. They stood on the sand, waving their arms, and moments later, the helicopter hovered right above them. The rescue team lifted them out safely, and that moment felt nothing short of a miracle. Later, the survivors said that if Carlo and Costa had not found the courage to go in search of help, their graves would still be buried beneath the sands of the Kalahari. Everyone survived, but fate had one final twist. Almost 2 years later, the same pilot, Costa, was involved in another plane crash, one he would never return from.